and welcome back to another episode of File New. My name is Ryan Selvy. I'm a motion designer based out of Brooklyn, New York, and we're here to go over all the tech news, the art news, the design news that is most important to you to keep up to date with all of the changing technologies and the cool parts of being an artist. We've got some really cool stuff on the show today. We're going over some Macs announcements that happened last week with some sneaks. We're going over some really cool interviews that I had with Jenny Brewer and Molly White, and we're also looking into some really fun variable fonts and some rebrands that you can, take some of the aspects and implement them into your own work. Hello to everybody that's over on the chat in YouTube. Let Me Be Frank is saying, yeah, buddy, over on YouTube, along with Voodoo Val. And then also hello to Penny Doodles, Ray, Oliver, Keys, Apurva. It's good to see you guys all as usual. But without further ado, I think we should take the time to go ahead and hop on into the news. So it is no secret that Adobe Max was last week. I was out there actually down in Miami, first time in Miami, and we had a really, really good time. Kelsey Slay, the one and only, did a fantastic job of hosting Adobe Sneaks, which if you're not familiar with, Adobe Sneaks is the time when Adobe comes out on stage and says, look, here's some new technology. We don't have a release date. This isn't necessarily on the product map right now for something that can be available, but it is something that is coming down the line, and we're working on this technology and we're really excited about it. Kelsey was with Aquafina and did a really great job hosting. She really brought an energy to it, and I am definitely trying to make a case for saying, let's have Kelsey host Sneaks every single time. Another big thing to focus on is the perfect placement of Kelsey's tattoo. Also a little got some pumpkins from over the garden wall sneaking on out there, but was excited to see Kelsey do that. One of the things that I was most excited about with Sneaks, aside from the really cool arcade cabinets that they had on the stage and stuff that they didn't end up playing, but I wanted them to get up and play, was this really fun project called Project Perfect Blend, and it was built within Photoshop. It is from Mengwei Ren, and it's really cool because on Sneaks, a lot of times the people who actually create the programs get to come out and have their day in the spotlight. And I had the best time watching Mengwei. I actually reached out to her on Slack, but she is very justifiably on PTO for now. So we're going to see if we can maybe get her on the show at some point. I'm going to advocate for that. So if anyone knows a good connection with Mengwei, please let me know. But I went ahead and I edited down a little bit of her presentation because it was so funny and it was also very, very cool. So let's check that out.
Holiday season is right around the corner. So I planned out this cozy winter theme for me and my boyfriend to take a holiday photo together. There's just one tiny little problem. He lives on the other side of the world right now. I'm a researcher in Photoshop, so I create my own Photoshop magic. Let me present you Project Perfect Blend. Let's get started with a photo of my boyfriend. Why are you guys laughing? This is a sad story. Okay, very easy. Let's remove the background. Place him to the right location. Okay, now we get a foreground layer and a background layer. Here pops up our magic button for tonight, a harmonize button. When we click it, our harmonization model in the back end will help us to automatically adjust the lighting and color.
It's so cool.
All right. Don't be too excited. Right, let's check out the before and after to see how our model automatically adjusts the color, the lighting, and even casts the shadow on the tabletop to make him look like he's really here. Now, my turn. I tried to find a photo of myself that matches the cozy winter theme. All I got was just a photo with overexposure and shadow on my face. So remove background and compositing doesn't work. It looks like a disaster. Let's not worry too much and click our harmonize button one more time.
Wow. Wow.
I look amazing, I know. Got a photo of two of us sitting together in the cozy winter theme. No one forgets about the fluffy friend. Remove background, harmonize. Our model is not just for human, it also generalizes to objects and animals.
Wow.
My boyfriend didn't know that yet, but I planned that I'm gonna be staying with him for a longer time. I just planned ahead for a tiny bit. for the New Year's Eve, and for the Valentine's next year, and Thanksgiving next year. Yeah? And all the way to 2096. All right, calm down, back to Miami. So I just keep imagining myself carrying my favorite camera and then take a nice little walk here on the beach. But we only get 60% because you see how complicated the surface of this beach is and the overall lighting is a little bit confusing. So I wouldn't know how to create a simple shadow or a reflection. So let's not worry too much and click our harmonize button to look at the before and after. I really got the sunset vibe on me and also a mixture of shadow and reflection on the beach. I have a photo of Paul. He's a super cool person. We love him. And so is the lighting on him. You see the green and purple, everything. Let's try to remove background and click harmonize one more time. Let's check out the before and after to see how our model perfectly handled all the relighting while also preserving the facial identities and structures on him. Sorry, Paul didn't remove wrinkles. This is a photo of our next presenter, Ruthie. This doesn't show you anything because it's too dark. Let's just do this thing one more time. How delightful is that? I just secretly collected everyone's photo, and I processed them through my harmonization models, and with some additional help from my designer friends, we created this perfect poster With Project Perfect Blend, we turn distant moments into shared memories and relight your imaginations. Thank you.
So that was the presentation. Like I said, I edited it down, so there were some processing times and stuff that were sped up and aren't true to the demo. But overall, I thought it was such a cool feature. Let Me Be Frank is over in the YouTube chat saying that's a good feature, and Voodoo Val is also really excited about it. Now, Let Me Frank also says, working on the official Venn diagram for creatives with cats, amazing sense of humor, and other through lines. I also agree. Over on the Behance chat, Oliver was saying that it was brilliant on all fronts, from the feature that they developed and the presentation for it, which is why, yeah, I definitely really want to get Mengwei Ren on the show if I can. But Oliver's really excited about the floating heads poster, and the green and purple everything from Keys is really great. There were a bunch of other sneaks. There's some other cool stuff. The one thing that I want to also call out, though, is Project Turntable. I did not edit down the version of this. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and bring this in and kind of talk over it while we're looking at it. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube if you'd like. Just look up Project Turntable. But basically what this is the ability to take 2D objects and draw them and then use object turntable to rotate them as if they were 3D objects. Now, this isn't only just left and right. It's also up and down, so you can change the perspective of everything, which is really neat. He actually goes forward and does something with a really cool bread basket. Also changing the degrees of this fry little character that we have here with the gloves and what have you. And you can see that this is when he starts playing with going under and over. I have no idea how they do this. Like I said, this is a Sneaks, so it's something that isn't slated on the roadmap yet or anything. But you can see here that since there's 2 dimensions, he's able to not only turn him around, but he's able to create a way more dynamic and interesting composition because of the capabilities of being able to change the perspective, which is really neat. You can see it even adds like an eye there, which if you're looking at the original one, you know, there is no eye, so it's kind of coming up with it. I think with anything else, like, it's obviously got to be things that it is referencing on its own, so you might have to hop in and you'll have to make adjustments for yourself. But this is Project Turntable. It's also adding extra legs when they're including this horse and moving it around from a side view. And then also applying it to multiple objects at once to have all of the bats also change their perspective and look in the same way so that it can be applied and accessed to make a more interesting composition. super excited about that. That is from Ji-Ching Chun from Project Turntable. And then, of course, Kelsey still killing it. Kelsey. Love Kelsey, love Kelsey, love Kelsey. Can't say it enough. But that was my two favorite parts of the Sneaks. What about you guys? Did you guys have other things? Did you guys tune in? Did you watch live? Or did you catch up? Ray is saying that this was their favorite sneak, which, it was between this and Product Blend for me. I feel like this I would like to use, and it would be powerful, but I think with the Project Blend, it's going to be something that I use more regularly on a constant basis. I think that there was a comment earlier in the YouTube chat from Penny Doodle, says that I work in the pet care industry, and you'd be surprised how much dog daycares love AI stuff like this to send to pet parents. Also, the idea of just being able to make better quality pictures for cats and dogs that are in shelters too. I know that's also something that is always needed because the ones with better pictures always get adopted more, and that's less stress. As I teased earlier, we have some other interviews coming up in the show, which I was really excited about. But before we do that, I also wanted to talk a little bit about Motion Design Hotline, which, if you guys were tuned into earlier today, is terrific title treatments, and that's spelled terrific as in TERRORIFIC. And this is with Evan Abrams and Kyle Hamrick, two very, very talented motion designers. We have a Spoopy and Let Me Hand It to You animation. I went ahead and I pulled them up as well. You can see in their show earlier today, they walk through how to make these and how to elevate your projects. You can see with the hand, it is interacting with not only the composition, but then as it is tracking and holding the text, it is looking at the bottom and the top. Also, with the Spoopy animation, you can see that it is not only jittering around, but it's also deforming and changing the text that is available for you to see. And you can apply this to a bunch of different things. Like, you can always use exactly step by step and do what they do, or you can also take this information and you're able to then apply it to your own project, which is really cool. So check that out. It streamed earlier today. It always streams in the mornings on Adobe Live, and it's just Motion Design Hotline, and you should go on and check it out. Now, there was a bunch of updates to Adobe products that were announced at Max, which is always really cool. But also, one of my favorite things about new Adobe products is new Adobe splash pages. And if you have updated your apps, you can see that there have been beautiful updates to the Adobe products splash pages. The Photoshop one was created by Guillermo Flores Pacheco, and it is this toucan parrot vibe dressed out in this beautiful dress up, but it still has human hands, which is really funny, which I'm kind of disturbed by, kind of excited about. Does that mean that it's a human with a giant parrot head, or do you think it's some kind of bizarre creature? And then obviously the lighting is beautiful. You always need to have a nice glistening moon. For Premiere, there is this new animation style, and it was created by Annika White and Carl Knight at Clam Studios. Very nice to see this. I always like it when there seems to be a really one-to-one correlation between the products and what they do, and how they're represented through art. And with this, I feel like with Premiere, you have kind of a timeline of events, and I like that this one feels like you can kind of see the animation of someone moving across. I also don't know to the extent if Annika White and Carl Knight are married, but they're not, because it's Knight and White. So why would they be that? I just thought it was. Then we have Angela Ho, also known as Ahoy, with this adorable After Effects splash page. My favorite part of it, I think, is this little guy down here, or this little guy that's like bumping into his butt with his eyes, which is hilarious. But these guys are my favorite. I kind of want them to be animated. I also don't know why they don't have ears or limbs like the big one. I'm wondering if this is like a tadpole and this is like a frog, where they will eventually grow it. Or maybe it is their children and she's saying goodbye. I would love to have these people on and just ask them what their new approaches are to splash pages. And then last but not least, we have the new Adobe Illustrator intro, which is by Adam G. He just goes by Adam G. And it's these weird wormy looking alien-like creatures that are also kind of like fish. It's a split between the two. Oliver's laughing at me for messing it up. Sorry. But I really like the combination here of really flat planes and 3D planes. And then just the abstract shapes where you can kind of squint and make it up to be whatever you want it to be. And they turn out to be really beautiful splash pages. What is everybody's favorite splash page in the chat? Do you guys like Photoshop, Premiere Pro, Illustrator, After Effects? Maybe you guys are bigger fans of like InDesign splash page, which I don't have featured here. Or Media Encoder, which also has new ones. They all have new ones. These are just the 4 ones that I have noticed in my workflows. And I think my favorite of the 4 probably is Adam G's Illustrator one, just from its simplicity and just the aesthetic and the color scheme that it has. If it wasn't that one, my runner-up, I think, would be the After Effects one. Oliver really likes the Lightroom Classic one. There is a comment from Voodoo Val saying that the Photoshop one is like an abstract toucan, and Penny is now opening InDesign just to see what it is. Christelle likes Illustrator and Premiere. And how about you folks over on YouTube? Do you guys have favorites? If you comment on YouTube, it helps with the algorithm and recommendations. So even if you're in Behance and you'd like to just go say hi real quick on YouTube, I'd appreciate it forever. But let's make this more worth your while. Since you're doing me a favor, I want to do you guys a favor and give you some good old knowledge. And let's go ahead and hop on in to resources. Now, I like to always preface with all of these things that whenever I bring stuff up or I reference stuff, it is important to know that this is all coming from Ryan Selvy. This is not necessarily being vetted and channeled through Adobe, so these aren't Adobe endorsements. They are just Ryan Selvy finding cool things for you. And as you guys know, I am a big fan of the publication It's Nice That. I was really fortunate and able to actually reach out and get contact with Jenny Brewer, and she sat down with me and we had a nice long conversation about this new article, When Perfectionism Makes You a Better Creative and When It Doesn't. We explore why perfectionism can often come hand in hand with creativity, how to use it to your advantage, and stop it from taking over your life. This is something that resonated with me so much, and I was really excited to sit down and talk with her. The link and all other links are available in the description under the raindrop. So if you want to go in and read the whole article, there's so much more that we don't go on over in this interview that is really good to read. And then also the illustrations throughout the piece are by Ram Rees, who is Overset Text on Instagram if you want to follow him. We've actually had him on Offset before, and he's a wonderful poster designer, and you've probably seen a lot of his posters around Instagram. He's also now working on wonderful bumper stickers. So without further ado, I would love to show you guys the interview between me and Jenny Brewer.
I'm Jenny Brewer. I'm the online editor of It's Nice That.
Thanks for coming on the show. I read your article, When Perfectionism Makes You a Better Creative and When It Doesn't, and I'd love to talk about it. What inspired you to write this piece?
I started noticing how many creative people are kind of seen to be the perfectionist in the room on a project. At any room, they're sort of expected to notice the tiny details that other people don't. I know quite a few perfectionists. I'm married to a perfectionist, and I wanted to look into it as a theory, like, is it a creative trait and why? And how, from a reader's perspective, how can they manage it, as it were, and sort of use it when it's useful and keep it at bay when it's sort of taking over?
And you ended up talking to a handful of people. You talked to a therapist, stop motion artist Sichi Song, creative director Pablo Rochat, among countless others. They all seem to manage it in different ways, though. What are some solutions they talked about?
Well, Sichi Song was a really interesting person to talk to, and she said that, like, which I think a lot of people feel like it stopped her from starting at all. Her learning, I guess, over her career was to just start, and whether that is not perfect and whatever you're putting out into the world, like she's making stop motion films, and she's been nominated for an Oscar for one of them. She's like top of her game, but she was saying, like, when she was starting out, she was trying to make like a masterpiece from the word go, and no one can do that. And she said she would never have got to the level that she is without having just made a film, made something that made her learn the whole process, not just the beginning, not the bits that she wanted to do or thought should be doing, the whole thing, to get feedback, to learn from what she thought of it. So Reynolds Lewisson, the graphic designer who I spoke to, one of the things that sort of provoked him to take control of it was the fact that he saw someone in a meeting being a perfectionist and was like, oh man, is that what I look like? I was like, oh no, I don't want to be. And he said something very profound, which I think I quoted in the piece, which was something along the lines of, started seeing how I want to be in the world, rather how I want the world to be. So he's thinking about how he wants to be viewed, and also talked about just being happy and like, is this worth stressing out over, or is it something I'm going to forget in a year's time? But his really, really specific piece of advice was, he said he's putting his perfectionism into spreadsheets. So like planning to the nth degree. He was designing a book that he was like planning where everything is going to be in every single corner of the book. So when he came to laying out, he could play within those parameters. And I know designers love parameters. Like, here's where you can be creative, go crazy. And so that's really worked for him.
Do you feel in the process of writing this piece, you had any self-reflection on your own process?
It's funny. I think, ironically, doing this, I thought maybe I used to be a perfectionist, and I definitely used to think that I was, and I definitely am not anymore. And it ironically became something that I was thinking about with this piece, because it took me a long time to write it, because in the time that I sort of started writing it to when I published it, a lot has changed, like at work and in my life, and I just like kept having like no time to do it, and then got to the point where I was like, I just need this to be done. It's not going to ever be perfect. It just needs to be done. Sometimes you do just have to have a deadline and put it out in the world, because you could iterate to the point where you go too far. And I've done that with articles before, because I've started with a point and tried to like neaten it up so much it stops making sense. I don't know what the parallel of that is in design, but
wait, that's the literal parallel. It's exactly what you're talking about in the article. If there was any article for this to happen to, this would be the one.
And talking to a therapist, when I asked what is the main creative trait that aligns between perfectionists and creatives, the therapist told me it's imagination. So that vision is intrinsic to a creative person from a young age. If you were really imaginative when you were a kid, then even if you haven't ended up doing it for your job specifically, if that is there, and you also find yourself kind of obsessing over the details, they're sort of hand in hand. And I thought that was really fascinating and something to be unpacked.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about all the accountants and scientists out there with wild imaginations.
Exactly. It's interesting interviewing a therapist about something that you start to then ask them questions like, am I in therapy or am I doing an interview? Like asking them about
why are we suddenly talking about my mom, like
exactly. Like, we talked about upbringing, and that was where it got a little bit personal for me, not massively, because my family were very supportive, but I know for a fact that a lot of people have had a similar experience, in that you weren't like disparaged for being good at art, but it was like, oh, you're the arty one, which I was. I studied design before I went into writing. I went to a school where they were like, so you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer? And I was like, I'm going to do a foundation course in design. And they were like, what? Don't know what to do with you. So that bit about upbringing, talking to the therapist about upbringing, was really enlightening, because she said that so many people have this similar experience of being kind of diminished, but kind of like, oh, okay, so yeah, that's going to be difficult for you, or like, are you sure you wouldn't rather do something that makes you money? And so when they choose that as their career path, they're like, right, I'm going to prove everybody wrong, kind of thing. We talk about that a little bit in the piece, like your motivations, or whether you're out to prove to someone wrong, or whether you're out to like create something. She talks about very serious things, when people get obsessed with stuff and it starts to tip into their feelings of self-worth, and this isn't good enough, therefore I'm not good enough kind of messaging, which is when people start to need to talk to a therapist about in a serious way. But when it feeds into your work, it's a blurry boundary, because it is an expressive medium, an expressive career path.
It's that external and internal conflict of proving it to other people, but also proving it to yourself, like seeing your every error, But I know when speaking to Sichi Song, she mentioned about the glorification and revival of imperfections in work. That really interested me. Can you tell us more about that?
I think it's something that's come up a lot in conversations for the past year or more. We've published a piece earlier this year about the return of analog kind of thing, and people kind of looking to go back to handmade. And there's a few people I think are referencing the piece who artists that we've interviewed, creators that we've interviewed on the site that are like going for the analog, going for the hands-on processes to kind of enjoy the process and create something that has a bit more authenticity. That's the key word here that a lot of people, it gets overused, but it is true. It's authenticity. People crave human touch, the human touch on creative work, and seeing how things are made, even if it's a bit rough around the edges, it is something that I think people react to a lot. And Sichi, the stop motion who I spoke to, also said the same thing. She thinks that there's a lot of benefits to a lot of the technology that's been brought into stop motion. The human reaction to a piece that's a little bit more handmade and maybe not perfect is just so much stronger and so much more of an emotional reaction. And it's good to hear as like someone who loves that type of work, but also for creatives to know that there's still a place for that big time. And it's coming back. Like puppets are everywhere. Everyone loves puppets. Who knew that there would be a puppet revival in 2024? Great. Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And where can we find you online? What can we look forward to seeing from you next?
You can find us online. It's nicethat.com. Also on all of the social media channels, especially our Instagram is worth checking out. We've got some really interesting creator content now coming out soon. So definitely worth checking out for a bit more kind of video content behind the scenes and process stuff. And then beyond that, I'd encourage your viewers to check out our column, The View From, which I also commission, which we work on every other week. We have a correspondent in a different country that reports on the design scene there. So we have one coming up focused on LA, and then in a couple of weeks in Berlin. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Great. Thanks again for coming on the show and writing a beautiful article. Read the whole thing on itsnicethat.com. Yeah, so how'd you guys like it? Like I said, I really resonated with the whole experience. I thought it was something that I've honestly struggled with a lot, especially when that kind of got to the part of internal and external and trying to make it perfect for, like, you're like, who am I making it perfect for? Am I making it perfect for myself, or am I making it perfect for external validation? And then I also really liked talking about the rise of analog technologies and analog art. The idea that this is something that is becoming more trendy and people like to see the human touch just because it's kind of getting easier and easier to create this really polished work. I know this also was really something we've talked about in previous episodes, because we were talking about animation, and we were talking about how for the longest time in animation, like if you look at Toy Story or something, it's something that it was like, make it as realistic as possible so it looks like these things are moving, and we just recorded it with a camera. But then it kind of became so far that that's easier to do now, so now it's like even more interesting to not lose the subtle touches of animation and not to lose that handmade feel, which is really cool. Switching gears here, I also wanted to hop into the other interview that we had. Also, thank you to Voodoo Val over on Behance and on YouTube for putting the link in the chat. If you're watching a replay and you don't have access to it, just check out the Raindrop. As I was saying before, like, it's just called When Perfectionism Makes You a Better Creative and When It Doesn't. And this one is really good because of the diagram here that was made by Ram, but there's also a bunch of other illustrations in the article that are just fun to look at, and then really good examples of some of the artists that she interviewed. So I definitely recommend checking it out. Hello to Danish. Welcome to the Behance chat. Also, hello to Winter and Powell saying puppets are awesome over in YouTube chat. 100%. I have literally I have this guy right here that I can whip out anytime because we love puppets. File new. But without further ado, I think we should hop into our other interview that we have. I was really excited. I honestly was not expecting Molly to write back to me, just because I have followed her online for many years, and I'm a fan of hers. And so I was just like, this is a shot in the dark. We're going to see if this is something that we can talk about. By the way, real quick before we do that, Winter is saying perfectionism has stopped me many times. It stops me all the time. It's something that I struggle with a lot. And so it was really helpful and cathartic also to read this article and feel really connected to it. But speaking of feeling cathartic, a lot of times when you are working in a artistic sense and you're posting online and you are finding where to post and how to post, it gets really overwhelming because you don't know where to post and you don't know how to, like, what is the right place to put your content, how to make sure you still have ownership over it, how people can still find your work. And so Molly wrote about POSSE on Citation Needed, which is one of her newsletters. She does many different things. We go over it in the interview. I guess we should check out the interview and then we can talk about it a little bit more. But feel free to keep it coming in chat. I'm texting in chat while we're watching the videos here. So here we go. All right, so we're going to talk with Molly White from Citation Needed and talk about her newsletter article, POSSE, Reclaiming Social Media in a Fragmented World. Hi, Molly.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good, thanks. Can you introduce yourself for anyone not familiar with your work?
Sure. So I write about technology pretty broadly speaking. I actually have a pretty strong focus on the cryptocurrency industry and some of the issues in that sector, but I also write a lot about the web more broadly, where I think the web should be going, and sort of my approach to existing on the web as someone who these days more or less tries to make a living from it.
As artists, we're battling the same challenge. Our work and content is at the whim of large tech companies' algorithms and platform changes. When they shut down, or leadership changes, or sentiment changes, etc. In this article, you point to POSSE as a potential solution. What is it, and where did you first learn about it?
So POSSE is an acronym that I think originated with sort of the indie web movement. I guess perhaps for those who aren't aware of what POSSE is, it's an acronym that means post on own site, syndicate elsewhere. And I became aware of it. Someone I really admire, Cory Doctorow, he's a technologist and writer, uses that approach himself. And so sometimes I would see posts on social networks from him that were saying, you can come see the original post at my website. And it was clear that he was using this sort of unusual approach to social media that I wanted to learn more about. And it's a way of sort of maintaining control over your work by hosting it yourself on a website that you control, a domain that you own, and then syndicating it to whichever social networks you use by sort of posting copies of it there and usually linking back to the original. As I was feeling social networks sort of decaying, falling apart to some extent, feeling the need to, like, do I need to use a different one, or should I try this new one? It became a clear solution to a lot of the problems I was feeling. Right now, I use like 4 different social networks where I want to post the stuff that I write about, and how do I handle having a presence on those 4 social networks, especially when some of them are new and they might shut down and then I need to move on to something else. And so it's a good solution, I think, to handling this sort of weird era we're in right now.
I thought it was funny when in your piece you mentioned initially being excited about new platforms, but now it's gotten to a point where it's like, oh God, all right, here we go again. You mentioned you set up a custom software to tackle this, but many creators are doing it manually. Can you speak to that and also any challenges that this presents?
POSSE is certainly not without its challenges. It's definitely not something that has sort of widespread support where you just download an app and, you're all set to go.
So if I post something on my website and then I syndicate it out to a couple different social networks and I get similar responses, I usually just respond in those places, and the conversations naturally take their own paths usually. So it's rare that I'm having the exact same conversation on multiple platforms. And if I am, then that's kind of a good sign that maybe I missed something in my writing and I should be clearer. So it's good feedback in that sense. For me, it's really more about having an authentic presence and conversation and a relationship with the people who exist on these different platforms that I use, rather than just sort of having this one-way blast where I'm just posting my writing out into the world and then ignoring whatever comes back from it, which I think is really the way to do it, because you run into issues where sometimes it can feel really weird to see someone who's obviously doing that, and it's sort of annoying and authentic, I think.
Yeah, and that touches on a great point. I know internet etiquette has changed a lot over the years. How do you feel about the organic nature of having a link out to every post? Like when you syndicate, do you link out for every post or only some?
Yeah, it depends a lot. I actually don't link back as much as some people do with the Posse approach. Some people will post a link back for every single post that they do. The website where I am syndicating these posts, I use it sort of as a microblog, as sort of a Twitter type of post location. The times where I do link back are usually if I write something that's longer than the social network allows. So if I write something that's more akin to like a blog post, I'll post the beginning of it or a snippet from it, and then I'll just link back for people who want to read the full thing.
Yeah, it's nuts. Each platform has its own posting requirements, like from image dimension sizes to character limits. I think Blue Sky has like 300 characters, which is weird because that's not even double Twitter's original amount. I think Twitter was like originally like 240 or something.
Twitter was 140 and it's now 280. And then, yeah, Blue Sky is like 300. And then Mastodon, it depends which server you're using. So like my Mastodon instance is 500. And so it's like, oh God, you're just like cutting and pasting all this stuff. So yeah, I mean, I have some custom software that I wrote to handle that for me. And it helps a lot where it will just cut the post appropriately given the social network. So you're not doing it by hand, because the people who do this stuff by hand, it takes a long time.
So how long have you been following this approach?
That's a good question. I don't remember exactly when I started doing it. I think I finally got around to writing the software to use for it earlier this year. So probably the better part of a year. I think it was pretty early this year.
Have you noticed a change in traffic?
I actually really don't track traffic to my website. It's one of those things where it feels a little bit intrusive, and I try to respect the privacy of people who visit my website. And so I don't track that kind of thing. But I would say that I have noticed the difference in my own sort of feelings about social media and my approach to social media, where now it's a lot less stressful for me as someone who writes for a living, who publishes on the internet, who relies on newsletter subscriptions for my income. Social media is really important to establishing that relationship with people who ultimately read what I write. A lot of people who subscribe to my newsletter found me on Twitter or Blue Sky or something like that. And so that's a really precarious position to be in, being sort of beholden to those platforms. And so with the shakeup at Twitter, it was scary when things started to go south, where it's like, okay, if I lose my audience on this website, what's going to happen to my newsletter, my career, basically? And now I feel a lot less anxiety about that, because it's really easy for me to just swap in a new social network to sort of establish a presence on those places. I have relationships on multiple social networks. I have people who follow me and where we're engaging, and I sort of feel like I have multiple locations talking with people and sort of drawing in interest in the writing that I do. I mean, I think sort of the big thing for me is when I talk about this stuff is sort of, you can do it in stages. You don't, if someone is looking to adopt this type of strategy, you don't necessarily need to go out and like write your own blogging software to sort of make this happen for you. I think that it's really scary to suddenly just be like, oh my God, how do I even start getting a domain or choosing some software, and do I have to host it myself, and what is all this stuff? And there are really good ways to sort of gradually move in that direction. Maybe you get a domain and you just redirect it to your Twitter account. That's still a step in the right direction, because then if Twitter goes away, or if you decide not to use it anymore, you can still redirect that link and people can still find you wherever you are. They don't have to go hunt down your new username on some new platform that you're using. So I try to really underscore that it's something that you can really just take small steps towards doing if you're someone who feels like this is something that you want to pursue.
That's such a smart approach. Thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through all of this. Where can we find you online?
So my newsletter is citationneeded.news, and then I am at mollywhite.net for all of my various posts and things like that. You can find me on social networks from there.
Thanks, Molly. We'll keep up with you and your posse online. Thanks for being here. And thank you again for Molly for joining us and having a part of that big conversation. I was seeing some interesting chat in the chat while that was going on. I see that Voodoo Val is saying, oh, hello, Roscoe. Voodoo Val was saying that it was a great interview, and that there is a bunch of crazy bananas from Penny Doodles saying the different posting requirements and trying to juggle everything. And then, I was just kind of amazed at the fact that she just casually wrote a script. But apparently, Oliver is also saying, I wrote my own code to do things through the Twitter API long ago, which, you know what? You guys are smart people. But speaking of different social networks and jumping around, Robert says meow. Yes, this is Roscoe. There is a resource that I wanted to share with you guys at redact.dev. And this one is all about mass deleting things from different social networks. This is something that, as you are kind of conscious of your footprint and your what you have online, it's different services and different things to get rid of what you previously had. I have not personally signed up and used this, but it is something that I've been looking into because I don't necessarily have anything that I want to get rid of. The interesting thing here is I think it runs on your system, which is interesting, and so you download it onto your computer and then you kind of log into things to get stuff. And it has pricing and different services. But I thought this was also just an interesting kind of like, oh, yeah, I mean, there are also old instances. Like, I did try out Mastodon for a second, and I don't know if I want my stuff on there, so maybe I just delete everything. You can also delete different options like only replies or likes, which would be also really cool to be able to kind of get rid of that as well. It'll also maybe adjust your algorithm. I know there are some people that go onto YouTube every single year, and they delete all of their likes and watch history on YouTube so that then all of their recommendations, I should just move over because someone is in the way, all the recommendations and everything are then changed and refreshed so that you don't kind of go into this self-perpetuating cycle of the content that you're getting is also being then served back to you. And I know we have a lot of resources this week, but one of the last ones that I wanted to share with you guys is this poster designer, and I think this is a really good place to be able to kind of just start and get ideas. This is available at emboss.altavista.org. And this is an experiment made by a designer for other designers, and the best part is it's 100% free. So you go, you can create a random poster. We can say like file new. And we're going to say your best source of tech, art, and design news. Tagline could be with Ryan Selvy, and detail could be like every Wednesday. And then it just kind of can help you cycle through different stuff. You can either download it and it's already animated, or you can switch it. And it's going to just continue to play with different posters. You can press the arrow up to change the layout and insert your text below as well. So you can also like cycle through it here. Oh, pressing down downloads it, which is fun. And whereas like as designers, I don't feel like we're necessarily ones to constantly use all of this because you kind of want to create your own. But I think it is an interesting resource to be able to see how you can implement simple animation into a poster. Even if it's abstract, it just adds this visual interest to it. And then also there is the ability just to get inspired or get out of your rut and maybe do something that you wouldn't normally do. So you can go ahead and check that out, and I think it'd be really nice. Next up, I would love to hop on over to Rebrand. So Rebrand is the time of the show when we like to go over different rebrands that are either noted or picked up by different publications or I just run into. And there are two different ones that I wanted to highlight. First one being Kleenex. And this is when I was looking at the other article on It's Nice That I came across this new Kleenex logo that's here, and it has this fun little swirly wave at the top. Also was excited to see two different things here. We have both this kind of type and how it works with this cursive type. Also Happy has like little gays here. That's fun. Now, one reason I wanted to bring this up in the show, as we normally like to do in any sort of rebrand or look, is of course always specifies it's not sponsored. Kleenex did not pay us to do this or anything. But what I thought was really interesting was this little curly top. Now, a way that you could do that, and a way that I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily think to do it, is they'd go into Illustrator here, and maybe they would make like a kind of crisscross kind of vibe, and then maybe they'd like come back and either like adjust these, and it gets like real wonky real quick, which is not very fun. So don't do it that way. Another way you can do it is by taking advantage of the curvature tool, which you can get to by doing Shift and the tilde key. And what's really cool is here you can press a point, and then when you press the second point, it's going to automatically curve as you kind of then create this nice wavy back and forth. And of course, you can always take this after a point, and you can then switch over to your pen tool just by pressing P, and then you can just turn it into a regular shape that then you can manipulate to your liking. Another way that I might be able to do something like this is I could probably go in and create maybe like a line or something. We're going to increase the stroke. And there is actually an effect called zigzag. If you go down to distort and transform under your effects, then you can go and change that to zigzag. Not only do you have the ability to increase the size of it, but you can also switch it over to smooth if you would like. You can increase or decrease the amount of ridges per segment. And then what makes it easy is you can then add a intersection here. And as we then switch this out by going like that, but even to that point, that is a way of slowing down. You can still use your curvature tool in that sense by doing Shift tilde key and then clicking here, and you can just bend it, and it's going to automatically bend. It's still entirely editable too, which is nice. So you can go to the zigzag in your appearance panel or in your properties panel over here, and if you click that, you can then still increase or decrease the ridges per segment. And then change the size. Of course, if you're going to do this, once you want to kind of hop in and start working on the other parts of it, you're going to want to go first to Object, Expand Appearance, and that will change the through line of that line that it's following to then be a line of the curvature of the actual stroke. That way you can then move it around. I'm seeing in chat, people are saying it looks like a goofy monster mouth. Just like gums, no teeth, right, Penny? Ew. No, guys, I don't think it looks like that. But it's right in time for spooky season. So that's one interesting approach. Hats off to the team that did this. This is apparently Turner Duckworth's Kleenex rebrand features a bespoke serif inspired by a mean case of the sniffles. And that is an article on It's Nice That if you want to check that out. And then the other one that we have here is from brand new. They spotted a Kajabi rebrand, and there were a few reasons why I wanted to bring this up. And I just want to highlight them real quick. One being that if you look at the before and the after, you can notice that there's a change in design as far as the approach to like design principles. Like if you look at the before, all of this really fits to a scalable and print export, whereas like it doesn't have any gradients, it doesn't have any really overlapping shapes, whereas the new one has a very strong gradient presence and overlapping shapes, where I initially was like, well, what are they going to do if they ever have to print it? But then immediately I'm like, wait a second, Kajabi is like an online payments platform for creators. Once again, not advocating, this is just what it is. There no need, honestly, to have this approach to maybe having something that could be printed, because they are most likely not going to be printed, and even more so if they're printed, they're probably not going to be printed in black and white, so you can kind of get away with this gradient look. I think it's interesting to see more gradients in logos. And then the other thing that I thought was a really good through point of this was this little kick out of the J and the I. You could always go in, and if you were to like create something on Illustrator, and we'll do file new as one does. We're going to make it Adobe Clean, black. We'll blow it up like this. You can always go in and go to type outline, create outlines, and then you can then go in and like use something like the pen tool or the pencil tool to really create something. Maybe even the blob brush, you're going to be like super nasty about it, you know, and bring those together, and then you can kind of go in and then refine accordingly to make the small selections that you want. You can always cut out of it as well, maybe if you wanted to kind of find something. Control Y to switch it over and do like a a little like kissy moment there. I'm going to highlight all 3, press Shift M, and then hold down Alt, and then you can kind of like create it that way too, which is very interesting to see. Everyone's talking about the cat being gone. Pay attention to me. Then if we hop back into our file new segment here, we just have a few more things. I want to quickly hop into font of the week. We are close to spooky season. It is spooky season, and I like the idea of fonts that can be spooky or grungy or weird without it being entirely focused straight to the month of October. I think that this dilemma is a really fun one. This is available through TrueType and Adobe Kit or Adobe Fonts. It's crazy. It's been like 5 years. I still forget how to say it. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pull it up. It's linked out in the raindrop, as I said. But the cool thing about this one is designed by Mark Caniso from PS Type. But the coolest thing about this is that it is a 2-axle variable type. What does that mean, Ryan? I'll tell you what that means. It's cool that they have both axes that you can adjust on your lettering. So here we'll make this say file new, as we always do. And what's cool about it is we can change the italics from 0 to 100, and you can see that there's some things changing here that aren't just slanting the letters. It is in between of the shapes that are actually changing. So if I go to like 50, you can see that, especially in this W situation. We're gonna see if we can make this even bigger so you guys can see it better. In this W situation, the triangles here are becoming a different shape because they're facing downward there. But as you continue to italicize it, it goes up, which is really cool because you have full control over the typeface, which is really nice. Holler says, what does that mean? And so that's one axis, which they say refers to registered axes found commonly across variable fonts. And the other one is weight. So then you also have the ability to make it real fat or really thin. I personally like it when it's really fat like this, with the italics all the way up. But I think you can even really get these really weird shapes that move around. And then you can also kind of play with different italics through your poster design. So like, let's say you would want to do like 47 here. All you have to do is, if you're in something like Illustrator, you would go, and once it's synced, you would then put something in here. We'll say file new. We're going to make it nice and big. And I'll change this to dilemma, variable bold. And when you go over to your properties panel under your character, there's this little area. It's these 2 T's. And then that will open up this area where you can then change the weight and you can change the italics. And then if you were to go in and bring this down, do the same thing, you could then change the italics or something. And it still feels cohesive. It still feels like it could all be part of the same poster design, but it adds a lot of variation and you can have a lot of fun with it. And without changing out of a single font, you have full control, which is really neat. So that's really well developed and even shown in the thumbnail that they have on Typekit. Big thumbs up and shout out to the team that worked on that. And then, I don't know, maybe we'll save this off for next week or not, but Creative Boom did a wonderful write-up about graphic designers sharing their top tips for choosing the right fonts. And I have not reached out to Katie, but maybe we reach out to Katie and maybe we can see if we can do that next week. Next week, I'm very excited. We're having Finn on because it's going to be a next-gen takeover, which is really cool. Finn, I actually got to meet him in the summit a few months ago, but he was also at Adobe Max. He is going to be with us. You can find him on Instagram as Finn Create, and he is a New York-based artist. He makes really cool stuff that's like grungy. He does murals. He does parkour. And we're going to have him on the show, and he's going to be walking through some stuff. So that'll be really fun tomorrow because we have a whole, not tomorrow, next week, because we have a whole lineup of stuff. But plenty to look forward to, and I hope you guys enjoyed the interviews, and I hope you guys enjoyed everything today. Please let me know your feedback. Love to hear it as always. And thank you guys for being here. My name's Ryan Selvy. You can find me on Blue Sky as ryanselvy.com. You can just go to ryanselvy.com for that posse. And also on Instagram, I'm just Ryan Selvy, RyanSelvy. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and gave love in the chat. Thank you to Let Me Be Franck. Thank you to Duval for moderating and Winter Powell for being over here on YouTube. And also thank you to everybody else like Penny Doodles and Christelle and Uma Korn for just keeping it nice and fun in the chat while we were going. This is not the last show of the day. Make sure you stick around on Adobe Live because we've got more coming to you. We got office hours coming up next, and that is a real great time with Andrew Hockrottle. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to him. Also, Let Me Be Franck says, plug your interview. I have an interview on Let Me Be Franck, which is really fun. Make sure you check out that podcast. Alyssa sits down with me and asks me about everything from Adobe Live to my life growing up to relationships and everything. So if you want to know me more, check out Let Me Be Franck. But stick around for office hours. You guys will get pushed over in just a second. Roscoe came over and bit my arm, so it's time to go. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Talk to you soon.